In this short video, we're going to try to clarify the differences between the associative, the commutative, and the distributive property. So we're going to talk about associative first, and we're going to talk about associative in the context of addition. And whatever we learn here for addition also applies to multiplication. So the associative property has to do with associating, with grouping numbers together. So because it has to do with grouping, the symbol we normally use for grouping is parentheses. So you're usually going to see parentheses when we talk about associative property. And what it's telling us is telling us that if we have a group of numbers like 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're adding them together, how I associate these numbers together, how these guys partner up, does not matter. So I can associate the 2, the 3, and the 4 together, or I can have the same group of numbers, but associate the 3, the 4, and the 5 together. It does not matter how I associate them together. My answer will be 14 in both of these associations. So that's the associative property. The next property we're going to talk about is the commutative property. And once again, we're going to talk about it in the context of adding, but whatever we discuss for adding also applies to multiplying. And commutative has to do with the order of numbers. So if I have, so let's look at the same four numbers, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Commutative says, okay, I don't really care so much about how I group them together. What I care about is what order they're added in. And commutative property says that whether I add them in that order, or I add them backwards, or I even scramble them up, whether I add 2 first, then 5, then 3, and then 4, the answer is still going to be 14 in all of these cases. So commutative property has to do with order. And finally, distributive property, and this is the only one of the three that does not only apply to addition or multiplication. It kind of brings the two together. And for distributive to apply, you have to have some number times a sum or a difference. And that looks like this. 2 times, and you can have in the middle 3 plus 4. And what distributive tells us is that we can take that 2 and we can distribute it across the addition. So that would be 2 times 3 plus 2 times 4. That 2 can be distributed to the 3 and the 4. So if we do the problem that way with the distributive property, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, and when I add these two together I get 14. Or, whether I do the problem the original way that it was written, if I try to add the 3 and the 4 together first, I get 7, and then multiply it by 2, I get 14. Both of these give me the same answer. So distributive property says, yeah, you can do the inside of the parentheses first, or you can take that 2 and distribute it across the sum. It's a good idea to look at these practice problems now and see if you can then identify what the property is happening between the left side of the page and the right side of the page. See if you can find what property is in use. If you need to, pause the video so you can try to figure it out yourself. As soon as you're ready, hit play, and I'll tell you what property it was. So hopefully you see that at the top where I have 5 times 7 times 2, and 2 times 5 times 7, what I did here was I scrambled the numbers together. So because I scrambled the numbers together, that's an example of the commutative property. And if you look at the next example, what I did was I grouped the numbers together. Remember that word group has to do with associating parentheses together, so that is the associative property. It's not distributive because the 3 and 5 is not a sum or a difference. And finally, in the last example, it is distributive because I have 8 multiplied by a difference, by 2 minus 4. So the last example is distributive.